Hey everybody, Kevin O'Connell with episode 15.
Yep.
No, this is
16. Okay. Hey everybody, Kevin O'Connell with the Niche Movement Podcast, episode 16. I'm super excited to bring a GW graduate that started Lemonade Day DC, Emily Massel. She's one of our youngest guests here. She's currently the director, yes, the director. She is in her early 20s, just graduated college. She's the director of community development at Gallup, where she's doing a lot of work with youth empowerment, entrepreneurship, education. The three things I was really excited to talk about is how she saw a project, Lemonade Day, happened in another city, her hometown, and basically took it and sat on it for a year or two, and then when she had that spark, she started it. What she didn't realize is that actually wound up getting her first job here as the director of community development, and it took 3, 4, 5 years. It took phone calls, emails, fundraising. It took a lot of tenacity, and what we really talk about is the second thing is it's relationships. We talk about this all the time. We're in a connection economy that I think she even admitted it in this podcast, you'll listen, is that I don't think people even looked at her resume because they knew her work ethic. And we wrapped up talking about like what the work she's doing at Gallup and what it means to be in entrepreneurship, but also the biggest thing is whether it's entrepreneurship, whether you're in a leadership role or not, there's a big difference between management and leadership. We also had some behind the scenes here. I don't know if it'll make it, but I think what we realized and what Emily realized by taking some Strengths Quest entrepreneurship test is there's a difference between influencers and relationships. And she says that she's an influencer, and I really think you'll get that out of her. And we swear she does take vacations, she does unwind, but she has a very, very great story, and you can hear her chuckling here as we do this intro. But what I really like to plug here is we have the Niche Movement Snapchat guest stories unfolding starting in April here. Every day of the week, pretty much we have somebody different, from Twitter to Gallup to production assistant Dr. Oz. There's so many different people taking over our Niche Movement account at Niche Movement that I'm telling you, you do not want to miss one of these guests, because if you're looking to connect with somebody that loves their job, works at a unique spot, this is the spot to do it. The other plug is if you know somebody that should take over and do a guest story, please get in touch with us at Niche Movement, or you can email me, kevin@thenichemovement.com. Please really enjoy this episode. We've done a lot, and I tell you everyone's my favorite, but I really had a pleasure to sit down an evening here at WeWork and interview Emily, so enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, Kevin O'Connell out there with another episode of the Niche Movement Podcast. I'm super excited to have a DC GW graduate here with me, Emily Massel. She works for Gallup as the Director of Community Development. We're gonna get into that, but as anybody that's tuned in and watched these before, I like to kind of tell people, how do I know Emily and how is Emily attached to the Niche Movement? And so it was about a year ago this time when I was hired by GW to do some digital storytelling consulting and then do the video. And Alex Bosetta was like, you have to meet Emily. And I was like, well, who's Emily? And she's like, she's the one who brought Lemonade Day here to DC and to GW. And I was like, okay. And I honestly, Emily, expected you to be like late 20s, 30s, like a pro staff. And I remember seeing you on stage, and I'm like, you know, you're a senior. And I was like, well, what are you doing? And you went on and on. And so Emily brought Lemonade Day DC to GW, and we're gonna go into that. I got multiple cameras on here from Dan and Hannah going here, it's distracting. From there, you know, I told Emily back in April when we aired the video and we were talking at the reception, I was like, you'd be a perfect candidate for a Niche Movement guest story. And we're gonna be launching, and this is our plug, we're gonna be launching Niche Movement Snapchat guest stories. So I emailed Emily literally like 5-6 days and was like, hey Emily, here's one initiative. Do you know anybody interested? I said, by the way, we also do a podcast. I think this would be the perfect platform to tell your story versus doing an interview and a write-up. And literally 3 or 4 days later, we have her here today doing it. So Emily, I start every podcast off, everybody knows this. I'm here because I like telling stories. I like helping people and connecting people and helping them find their niche. I'm curious, why are you here? Why are you doing the work you're doing?
Why am I in the seat right
Sure,
now?
Like why do you think you should deserve to be a Niche Movement podcast guest, or what you're doing in DC?
I think that it's really awesome, the work that you're doing, and then also my own journey kind of led me to caring deeply about people understanding their own talents and their own strengths and really appreciating them. Because unfortunately, a lot of the institutions and systems that are set up, they tend to really praise and target and appreciate and reward very specific types of talent. And so if you don't find either the system or the institution or the environment that's going to reward and appreciate your talent, then you often don't think you have it, or you have a hard time kind of admiring what makes you uniquely strong. And I think a lot of my life I was always super active, super like always trying to like create a new event or a new organization. But at the end of the day, it just it wasn't until Lemonade Day really where I kind of received some like recognition for like, wow, like what the talents that you brought forth and put behind this project are like really awesome and like really special. And I was like,
I remember at the reception day of Lemonade Day, we were filming, and you were, I think, one of the top 2-3 speakers next to Ron, who was the president at the time. Tell me, so for all of you out there, and maybe you can give a quick 30-second pitch of what Lemonade Day is nationally and what it is at GW, and we can talk about how you brought that there.
Yeah, so Lemonade Day is a national nonprofit that began in 2007 in Houston, Texas. It's since expanded to, I don't know, probably nearly 40 cities across the country. And really the purpose is to introduce 4th through 8th grade youth to the fundamentals of business and entrepreneurship. And this happens through an experiential financial literacy program where students create their own business plan, and then at the culmination of going through each of these lessons around planning, budgeting, marketing, site selection, finding an investor, they actually have the opportunity to put that business plan into action and participate in a citywide Lemonade Day where they operate their own business for the day, which is a lemonade stand.
They get, you know, a $2 Lemonade Day, they get $2 back. They understand what it is.
They keep their own profit. They have a plan around spend a little, save a little, share a little. And it's just a really self-empowering process for students to go through at such a young age.
And I mean, I know last year, and I've heard the stories between what you're doing at GW and in DC, as well as when I went to the national conference, but I know people that use that money to fundraise for another organization or to give back to their church or to give to their brother and sister. So and these kids are 8, 9, 10 years old, very empowering stories. So I'm curious, so Emily, by the way, is actually, I'm pretty sure, our youngest guest.
Cool.
So Emily is fresh out of GW. She just graduated in May of 2015. She's been with Gallup for probably almost a year, but I know you interned there and we'll get there. Why did you bring Lemonade Day to GW? Because, and I was saying this off camera, when I was a senior in high school, I wanted to do Habitat for Humanity, and it didn't exist. And that's when you and I connected. I'm like, wow, these stories are similar. Like you just had that, like you saw something, you did it. I remember you can tell more of the story about PNC, but like you just did whatever it took. Yeah. And that's what we talk about at the Niche Room, is like that moment you feel challenged, invincible, but you're also thriving. And I think as such a, as a senior in college, like you were doing it. So talk to me, like why you saw it, I think in Indiana, and what inspired you to bring it to GW, and how did it all unfold?
It was quite a journey. I mean, what you just described right there of like, your biggest challenge, you feel so ready, but at the same time, you're thriving. You're thriving in this challenge. So I first experienced Lemonade Day in my hometown of Indianapolis, and I think it was spring of 2010. Okay. And I happened to go to a shopping mall, and there were 5, 6, 7 lemonade stands set up around the shopping mall. And, that's not normal. And the kids weren't just handing out lemonade and collecting money. They were breakdancing in front of their stands, and they were handing out samples, and they were dressed up in pool toys and floaties, and, had umbrellas. Yeah. And, now hearing that, saying that back, I'm like, oh yeah, that's normal, because we've been working with all these all these students and helping them think, through a real business lens towards a lemonade stand. But just seeing that for the first time, and I think that's what a lot of people, when they first experience Lemonade Day, they're like really blown away because they're like, yeah, lemonade stand's so simple, but seeing such a young person, we're talking 4th through 8th grade, apply real business concepts to this around marketing, promotion, site selection. So I was like, this is, I asked the students, of course I bought some lemonade. My dad is with me, so I'm pretty sure he actually paid for it. And I said, what is this? And they said, Lemonade Day. I'm like, okay, cool. Back in my mind, went home, kind of looked it up. I'm like, this is awesome. And I didn't really think much about it.
What year were you in college at that time?
So this was actually when I was a senior in high school.
Oh, wow. So you weren't even at GW?
I wasn't even at GW.
Okay.
And so I go out to GW that next year, and I'm a freshman. I'm out, I was studying international affairs, and some things were working out, some things were failing. There was a lot of change going on. Sure. It was really hard, and I was actually planning on transferring from GW.
I didn't know that.
It was just really difficult to make this big cultural change, and also, there was just a lot of kind of ups and downs with, I was offered an internship and then it didn't work out, and just a lot of things that you're like, oh, this is it.
It just didn't feel like a fit
and
yet.
then it's just like, things are kind of just falling apart. And so then my sophomore year, I thought, okay, I'll come back one more semester, and I've already been accepted in other universities to transfer to. If it doesn't work out, I'll just leave, but I want to give it one more semester. And meanwhile, in that first year, I had at GW, I had really been learning a lot about education reform.
Sure.
I'd been learning a lot about the city and kind of the disparities present in the city. And I was, in my dorm room my sophomore year of college, and I just felt really ready to do something. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of this feeling that I couldn't quite explain, where it's just like I have this energy.
Oh, I love it. I mean, it's just the entrepreneurial feeling, or you had to try it.
Yeah. Where you're just like, I'm not, and it was even I'm not quite sure what this is, what I want to do.
You could taste it, you knew
how I want it
something.
to manifest. But yeah, I'm just I'm ready to move. I'm ready to move. And so I sat down with my roommates and I said, let's start throwing out ideas. What are you passionate about? What are you interested in? And we start going around, and all of our passions, and it was immigration, public health, and me business, entrepreneurship, education. And saying those three things, my mind immediately jumped back to that May of 2010. Yeah. And I'm like, this program is perfect for, all the needs that I've been seeing, and, in this broader DC community, youth empowerment, graduation rates, kind of finding this connection between real life consequences and the classroom that students really need to feel, and then just entrepreneurial energy, more local entrepreneurial energy. So I literally the next day called Houston, Texas, and I said, hey.
So you literally picked up the phone. So you were probably 19 years old. Mm-hmm. Didn't even go right to email. You said, let me pick up the phone. Yeah. That's awesome.
Just I gotta call these people.
So who answered? What was the response? Or what, did you have butterflies, or you just had so much momentum? You're what do I have to lose?
The thing is, it's what do I have to lose? And also, I think that, now being at Gallup, Gallup is very mission-oriented around entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial talent identification and development. So I see a lot of research and stuff around it. And, a lot of the kind of talents that go into successful entrepreneurs are determination, are risk-taking, the ability to foresee and manage risk and things, and confidence. And while I was in it, the way I explain it is I caught hold of this vision. When I made this connection between the needs I had been recognizing in the city and this program, I just saw this big vision. Yeah. And from there, it was easy. It was nothing was going to stop it. Nothing was hard.
So what did the Houston office for Lemonade Day National say?
So,
Like you kind of explain, like, hey, this is what I do. I like to bring it to it because I think it still is the first university. You and I were just talking.
Yeah.
So what was like?
well, the thing is, at the time, the president she was like overly optimistic woman.
Yeah.
I mean, bigger than life.
Yeah.
Like, normally I kind of overwhelm myself, and this was the first time I ended up sitting down for coffee with her, and I walked out just exhausted. So she was, she was slightly hesitant. She's kind of like, okay, I'm gonna be in DC later. Like, let's talk.
Yeah.
Because the way all the other Lemonade Days had been set up until that point is you have a city champion.
Yep.
Who's typically a successful businessman or woman, successful entrepreneur in the city, who identifies this program and as their way of kind of their
Giving
philanthropic
back.
giving
Yep.
back is bringing it there. So then they hire a city director and pay them the salary for that and kind of offer the startup funds around it. So this was just a very atypical start to bringing it to DC, and someone had actually tried to bring it to DC like a couple years before, and it just didn't take off. So she was kind of like, okay, let's meet. And after she was in DC, like a month later or something, and we met, and she's like, all right, like, I'm gonna start, sending you some people that you should reach out to and just run with it.
Wow. So this is your sophomore year. Probably had a full credit load. Were you interning at the time, or like where else were you involved on campus?
Let's see. So at the time, I was taking 17, 18 credits. I was honestly, I started Lemonade Day sophomore year in August, so it was pretty early.
Yeah.
But I did get involved with a sorority, and I was part of a intramural. I was the quarterback for my intramural flag football league.
Nice.
But I'm trying to think of it. I think really once I started Lemonade
this
Day,
took up a
that
good
was.
chunk. So from that first phone call to the first year it was implemented was 2012. So that following spring, or was it your junior year?
So it was the first Lemonade Day was that following spring.
So it was your sophomore year.
It was my
So
sophomore
within
year.
about 6 to 9 months it happened.
It happened.
That's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it happened. And I mean, to happen, it was 70 to 80 hour work weeks just on Lemonade Day.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's just
and
me,
you
let
got
alone everybody else.
Zero. Like this was just, you were fulfilled by it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested because working in student affairs and then doing the work I'm doing now, like I meet college students like this that they usually get very overwhelmed. They are the typical student leader. And I think I was that way, and I like being busy. Like today was a perfect day. I came here at 8:30. I had a phone call from 9 to 10. And then went up to Van. Like I like days like this. I don't like days where I can sit and think and like. So where do you thrive? Like, is it those type of days where like it's just hustle and like.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I did feel so happy, like, being in that position where,
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much for 2 years, I would get a break, like, over the summer, but
Yeah.
never stopped thinking about it, even on breaks. But for 2 years, I mean, I just recall, like, towards, like, after Lemonade Day, my spring year, so the first year, and I sat down in a chair, and I ate a salad quickly. And I'm not kidding, I'll never forget that moment because I hadn't just sat down to eat a meal in months. But at the same time, I remember kind of in February, so nearing the end of the whole season, Lemonade Day season of that first year, and the national president was in town, and we sat down over dinner with at the time the associate dean of the School of Business. So the three of us are chatting, and she was like, "So what do you think about social entrepreneurship?" And I said, "What's that?" And
so a whole nother like light bulb or like.
It was just like now I'm still, designing programs, but for older students around entrepreneurship. And so this is kind of something to keep in mind now for me is like, I didn't even see myself as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what social entrepreneurship was. And it was them, the national president going, well, that's what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you fundraised, you rallied probably a couple hundred people together, you convinced people to either give you money or let you do this in the biggest city in the world. Like, I mean, you really were. And you were sacrificing a lot, it sounds like, to put this initiative and other people in front of you. And you did whatever it takes.
And but it's just like those 2 years of just like nonstop, and there were other people who were really nonstop too, David Ruda, Kayla Mocklet, but the president, was like, so you're not getting paid, like, are you, how do you feel? And I was like, she brought up, this will be a good thing for your resume. And I was like, that hasn't even dawned on me, I was just like, I was like, I would do this for free for the rest of my life.
Awesome.
Like, this is so great.
Cool.
I was going to say, that's one of your things.
What would you do for free? Yeah. And I never know what to say, but like, that's such a good example. And I remember when I graduated college, I had all the marketing internships at the top of my resume. And it didn't feel right. And I called out sick one day for my internship, and I flipped everything, the habitat, the involvement in the programming committee, the marketing club, and I made them job descriptions, because those were the things that like the late nights, the weekends, the fundraising, that it felt so natural.
Yeah.
So we're gonna transition in a minute, but to people listening, because it could be college students, it could be professionals that are like, I'm stuck, or I like half of my job or none of it. What piece of advice would you find or share, like, to be like, what sliver of hope could they maybe look for or find, or how to be more self-aware or discover themselves? Like, because it sounds like you were in the moment, it happened, but reflecting back on all that, what would you share, some words of wisdom?
Well, I think first of all, to like add a little bit of like, yes, like I was thriving and I was loving it and it was like so amazing. But the reality is, like, once I stepped out of the city director, so I was a city director for 2 years, and I stepped out of that position because it was time, and we brought in Alex Posetta, the new city director. I had a lot of processing to do. Like, I had to really intentionally kind of catch up on all of kind of the growth that I had gone through without having the time to sit down and think through it. So there's a certain amount of balance with, like, when you are, I think a lot of people, sometimes it's easy to be like, wow, they're so on top of it, they're in their career and whatever. But it's like, while you're not there, be appreciative of like having the time to like do your self-work, work on yourself, and so you're better prepared for when you do get to that next spot. Another thing I'll say is, I saw this quote the other day, and it's something like, the biggest thief of joy is comparison. Yeah. And I think it's really true that sometimes, when we're in it and we're like, oh, perhaps it's not my dream job, or it's not the greatest, most exhilarating thing, but like, I have best friends at work, or, I get to touch people's lives, or whatever it is that, you're finding satisfaction in. And it's kind of when we turn and look around and perceive other people's, oh, well, I don't have that or this, like, that's when kind of get off guard. So really being careful not to, compare yourself, and really just focus on, like, your own work when you have that time.
And find, even if it's not, like you said, your dream job, find that like sliver or something that you can look forward to, and no, because I've been out of college for 10 years. It'll be 10 years this May, but there's been plenty of ups and downs, plenty of great bosses, plenty of great projects, plenty of crappy bosses. There's been, and now with entrepreneurship, there's plenty of ups and downs, and and so I think, like you said, kind of not compare and take that time to be like appreciative of what you have.
Hey everyone, this is Dan, videographer and podcast producer for The Niche Movement. Thanks for checking out this week's podcast. We'll be releasing the second half of our interview with Emily Massel next week, so make sure to come back and check it out.